perverts, pits, all come together to dance. Pride. So this is a commissioned review. It's been on the docket for a little while. This is a true story about sort of the joining together of two different causes in the 80s in the UK. So I was a little bit nervous going into this because I tend to have very mixed feelings and not a particularly strong inherent pull towards true life stories. Like, they can be very nice, but they also tend to be formulaic. They tend to just not grab me particularly. And this was pretty good. I'm not going to say it was amazing. It basically was exactly what I expected it to be. So it does fit the formula of a lot of these kinds of movies. That having been said, being part of a formula is not the worst thing in the world, as long as you can execute that formula well. And I do feel that this does that. Even as it fits into the formula of here's these oppressed groups, they have reasons to not get along, they find common ground, there's a little tension, they join together, joy. That's the template. But it can be a template but still be well done or poorly done. And this is pretty well done. It helps that the cast is as good as it is. There's plenty of actors who I recognized, folks like Bill Nighy, Imelda Staunton, but also, a lot of the younger actors I didn't recognize, but they were also really good, and everyone had a good presence on screen. So in the 80s in the UK, being anything other than cisgender and heterosexual, I mean, predominantly gay, because the understanding of trans people wasn't where it is now, but being gay or lesbian was not an especially safe thing in Thatcher's Britain. Kind of like how being gay or lesbian was not a especially safe thing to be in Reagan's America. Things were rough. But another thing that was going on at the same time in the UK was the miners' strike, because Thatcher was really bad for unions and for workers. Again, much like Reagan's America. Boy, everything went downhill at the same time, didn't it? But the miners in a lot of mining towns, mining villages all across the UK, a lot of them went on strike because they were being just disregarded, not treated well, and the police were cracking down on those who were striking. They were cracking down a lot. And there was a group of gay and lesbian activists in London who saw this and went, what the cops are doing to the miners, that's the same thing they do to us. They make their presence around us known. They look for any excuse to harass or arrest us. And they're doing it to them. What if we show solidarity to them? We show them that we stand with them. And maybe they can come to understand us better. And there's the obvious clash that you would expect from that, because your mining towns are going to be rural, conservative, not especially welcoming to gays and lesbians. But there was a town in Wales, initially through a little bit of a misunderstanding, but did end up accepting support from this group. And from there, things built. As the members of the gay organization, were like, okay, we want to help if you'll let us, even though we know you don't really accept us. And then, people in the miners having an initial very harsh reaction to the presence of gay people anywhere near them, but recognizing what was being done for them, opening up, getting to know each other, until eventually there becomes a strong mutual support, each group for the other. And it executes that story really well. And it has a good balance of keeping an eye on the bigger picture of like these organizations as a whole and how they were viewed within the UK, but also of the individual people within it. And a fair number of these people are real people, like named the exact same name of the real people, some of whom are still with us, some of whom aren't. And I suppose I did look into this. That's, I guess, one of the few points of contention from people who did know the people involved. One of the really prominent activists who unfortunately did pass away in the 80s from HIV and AIDS. Some of his friends were frustrated that the film left out that, in addition to being supportive of the miners and being a very staunch advocate and activist, he was also a communist, like vocally, outwardly, and his politics were a huge part of what he was doing and why he did it and how he did it. And that isn't really brought up in the movie. And I checked that after having watched the movie, and I can definitely see how that would have been frustrating for anyone who did know him, because it's not like they twisted his politics to be something else. What he is depicted doing in the movie absolutely tracks with something that communist activists and somebody with that political mentality would be doing, with the general thoughts and approach that they would have. But it's never allowed to be called that. So yeah, I kind of get that frustration a little bit. But again, there is a really great balance in the performances, and especially just with watching some of these people from the mining town loosen up, whether it be, clearly sort of macho kind of dudes needing to just ease the heck up, or just how at ease a lot of the women, including some of the older women in the village, feel around them, and that, they'll later on they go to London, they go to like a leather bar, and they're just chatting. Like one of them just asking this guy in a full latex bodysuit, how'd you even get into that? And they're just making conversation and just being people together. Yes, with questions, yes, with things they don't get, but just, interacting like people and watching those relationships build is nice. And also, like, especially with a lot of what's going on now, seeing a real life story of two groups that don't have a lot of inherent ties to each other. There isn't a lot to connect striking miners with queer liberation, other than the fact that they were being oppressed by the same system and the same people. But that can be enough. If you're both being oppressed by the same system, then maybe you can find more common ground than you might think. You can find a reason to support each other, to make each other stronger in opposition to what is keeping you down. And I especially loved sort of the details at the tail end that eventually, when actual legislation about gay rights came up in the UK and actually moved forward, when it moved forward within the Labour Party specifically, a lot of that was down to the unified voice of the miners' union, who were good to their word and said, you helped us, we will help you. And they did. It's rewarding and refreshing to be reminded that sometimes groups that don't have a natural draw towards each other, and maybe even have reasons to avoid each other, if they can find that initial common ground, then not only can they be tolerant, they can be supportive, they can actually help each other, make it better for everyone. If you can set aside your preconceptions. And the movie also does a good job in terms of, like, yes, there are preconceptions on both sides. There's a lot of assumptions from the queer activists that, like, these are going to be backwards thinking, bigoted, whatever. And a good chunk of them are, but not all of them are. But at the same time, the film isn't going like, oh, both sides had assumptions. Yes, both sides had assumptions, but it's also very clear that the assumptions made by the bigots who did exist in the mining town are much more harmful. Like, the assumptions that the queer people made, maybe it's self-isolating, but it's not actively hurtful and harmful the way that the other assumptions were. So again, it's that ability to show, yes, there are flawed assumptions on both sides, but without equivocating in any kind of moral sense of, oh, both sides. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. And good. This was a good movie. This was an uplifting movie. And if you find yourself in need of something to remind yourself that people can pull together, this is good for that. I'm glad I saw it. Pride. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's what pays the bills. And there's also how I was commissioned to review this. If you have something you want to commission me to watch and review, you can do that through there. But you can support me at any number of levels. But even if you can't do that, like, share, subscribe, help me out as well. But don't worry too much about it. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. End credits, that means I need to shout out my top Patreon supporters. Robin Moore, Zupin Lutfula, Tarak, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Oliver B., Linda Walters, Emu Delkey, Leotha Boyd, Toy Loli, Becky Sparks, Renabi Likes the Poodle, Zach, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Adam RDL Taylor, Shay Lagourlay, Brendan LaRose, and TT. Thank you so much for your support. You can get your name in the credits too by checking out the rewards on the Patreon. You only tried to eat my earring once this time. That's much better.